Hello, and welcome to this segment of Good to Know. I'm Marcia Lombardo, outreach worker at the Medway Senior Center and host of this program. This program is designed to bring valuable information to the seniors and other members of our community. Today we're going to be providing information about a free service available to members of our community. It's called Interface, and I am joined by Tanya Snyder, who is the Clinical Supervisor for Interface Referral Service at William James College. Welcome, Tanya, and thanks for being here. I'm excited to get this information out to our community.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get started. What is Interface Service Helpline?
So we're a resource and referral helpline. I think about it as a bridge between consumer and provider of outpatient mental health resources. Mm-hmm. So we help connect people in the community with outpatient providers in or near their community as well.
Okay. And what can you help with? What can you help people in our community
So we can help with more traditional outpatient mental health resources, individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy, psychiatry, and if someone has mass health and is a child, we can connect them with those CBHI services, which includes like in-home therapy.
Okay, very good. And so how does this work? So if I want to call the helpline, Can you walk us through what would happen if I find myself in need of some services, in need of some mental health services, and I want to call? What happens when I call there? What will you ask me, and what kind of information will you be giving me?
Sure. So we're available Monday through Friday. We're very clear that we're a helpline, not a hotline.
Okay.
If someone is truly in crisis, their best bet is to use the local emergency services provider. And in this area, that's Riverside.
Okay.
And their number would be 800-294-4665.
Okay.
But for us, our number is 888-244-6843. And Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, someone would call us. If we're busy, sometimes they go to a voicemail, and it's okay, leave a voicemail, particularly with some times that would be good to call you back over the next day, and we will try to reach you at those times.
Okay.
But if you get us live, which is the ideal, about 20 to 30 minutes of your time to do what we call an intake over the phone with us. And we're collecting what we like to call the core four. So, we need to know a little bit about what your needs are, what's going on with you or your child, so that we can find the right fit for a provider. We need to know the locations you can get to for services, what communities are close by and that you're able to travel to, what time you can get there, and what insurance coverage you have, or if you want to self-pay for those services, what would be the amount of money that feels comfortable for you to do that on a weekly basis.
Okay.
And at the end of that call, we assign you a confidential code. This is how we're going to communicate with you as well as with providers. So we're never going to provide your identifiable information. We're never going to share your name, address, or telephone number with any of the providers we're reaching out to. That evening, your case is assigned to what we call a lead counselor, although we all work as a team to make sure things move along in a more timely fashion. But that lead counselor acts as your general point person working on your case. So that lead counselor looks at our database. We have over about 9,000 at this point licensed and vetted providers throughout the Commonwealth. And we check licenses to make sure that they have a license to practice in the state for whatever license they carry, whether that be independent clinical social worker or licensed mental health counselor, psychiatry. And what we want to do is also vet them. So we make sure there's no significant disciplinary actions against them. We also vet them more internally. We keep little notes about availability or people's experience on file so that we can use that information to try to make a good fit, or in some cases take them out of our database if we feel like it's not appropriate for them to belong there. Our database is free for providers, so they don't get any, they don't pay to become part of our database. We don't pay them for taking clients. There's nothing like that. It's just, it should be a nice way to help connect people is how we look at it. So that lead counselor would cull our database of over 9,000 providers, as I mentioned, looking for a good fit based on those 4 criteria that I mentioned. So are they in the right location? Do they have the right time frames available? Can they meet the mental needs that you're talking about? And if you're using insurance, do they take your insurance? Or if you're self-paying, do they meet your criteria in terms of dollar amount that you can afford to self-pay? Then they reach out to that provider and present a little snapshot of those core 4 criteria, but again, not using any identifiable data about you, only using that confidential code. The providers then contact us back, because often when we call them, they're in sessions with other clients.
Sure.
So they'll call us back and say whether or not this feels like a good fit for their practice, and if not, why it might be. So maybe we thought they had Saturday availability, but all of a sudden their Saturdays are pretty full. That would result in us putting a little note in their file, so then we could sort of eliminate them for any current searches on Saturdays.
Okay.
So when we have what we call a match, which is someone who says, yes, this is a good fit for my practice, we reach back out to the caller and provide them with their contact information so they can contact the provider. When they contact the provider, they're going to use the code. So that's going to be the link for the provider to say, yes, I felt like this person was a good fit for my practice and I can meet their criteria. And that way, let's say I give you a match, but you realize that person is someone you know.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yep.
You may decide not to reach out to that person.
Sure.
So they don't have any information about you other than this code. And you can choose to reach out to them or choose not to reach out to them if there was some reason why it didn't make sense for you to do that.
Okay.
We aim to have that process done in 2 weeks' time to give you a match, and we aim to give you 2 matches within that 2-week time frame, so that you have some choice about which one you want to reach out to. Sometimes we're quicker. We can move a little faster. I've sometimes done an intake and then started searching on a case the next day because it got assigned to me, and found 2 providers that day. So the very next day I have 2 options. Sometimes, depending on all those core 4 criteria, it can be a little more challenging, and it may take me a little more time. But we're in contact with one another along the way to explain why I'm struggling to meet the 2-week time frame, and to see if there's any flexibility around those criteria, to see if we can find something that has a little wiggle, so that we might be able to move that case along a little more quickly.
Okay.
So,
so now you mentioned the different types of therapists, that it might be a licensed social worker or it could be a psychologist. So who makes the determination? Does the caller call saying this is what I need, or do you, after you interview the person calling in, determine who would be the most appropriate therapist for that person?
So it's a combination. Sometimes people call with a clear sense of what they're looking for. Sometimes we're basing it on those core 4 and sort of eliminating the idea of they have to hold a certain license as long as they meet all of these criteria. And obviously with psychiatry, that's a different animal, in the sense that they have to have medical training and be a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner. So that sort of narrows that pool a bit.
Okay. And can you tell us about some of the struggles some of your callers have? What kinds of things do people call in for needing help with?
Sure. So across the country, anxiety and depression are typically the most reported issues around mental health. So I would say that tends to be a lot of reasons why people call, that they're struggling in that regard. Oftentimes it's family-related issues, attention deficit issues, social issues. It really varies.
Okay. Very good. And then can you also talk to us a little bit about substance abuse? I know that's a concern for many people in our community, and who is the provider in our area that would deal with substance misuse?
So we swim in the lane of outpatient mental health. So what I like to say is that people could certainly call us if they're straddling that area of treatment. What I mean by that is, let's say a parent found some paraphernalia in their child's room and was concerned, but not concerned that they have an addiction, but just, what does this mean? Why are they using this? Is this a coping skill that they're using to address some underlying mental health issues? We may be a good first stop for that person, or someone who's in recovery for a while and is searching for a provider. We also can be a good stop for them. If it's someone really struggling with addiction and really in need of a higher level of care, say partial hospitalization or a recovery home or program, your best bet is the Massachusetts Substance Abuse Helpline. I don't have that number with me today, but it's you can find it online, and they are a great resource for the whole continuum of care. Okay,
very good. And how long has this program been in place for Medway residents?
So you guys have had this since October 2017, I believe. I brought some data with me. And yes, October 15th, 2017. And we've served about 89 residents since that time.
That's wonderful.
So that's been great. Yeah.
So if someone does make a call and you've given them a couple of names and those names don't work out for some reason, is it okay for them to be calling back to get another couple of names from you, or is this something that can be ongoing, or is this something you get the 2 names and then?
Sure. So our process, which I didn't talk about, is we also have the process of follow-up.
Oh, okay.
So what we do is after we provide the matches, we call and assess whether or not the person's been able to connect with one of those matches, and if so, how it's going, and if they weren't able to, what were the barriers that might have gotten in the way, so that we can sort of talk about where are we moving from there. Sometimes, I think about myself a little bit around the stages of all of us, really, around the stages of change. So how many times have you wanted to start a new habit or process, even let's say eating healthier?
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And you may do a lot of research and buy a cookbook or attend a class, but it's still a struggle to get to the point where you actually implement that as a lifestyle change. And sometimes that's what we're offering too. So we're offering an idea to someone, but they're not quite ready based on the stages of change to take the leap to actually connect with the provider. So sometimes we're talking about that as just being part of the process, and they could hold on to the name and connect with them when they feel more ready to do that. Sometimes life gets in the way. You might have kids or work and things get busy and you're not able to move on those right away. And sometimes the matches we provided for whatever reason don't feel like a good fit to you. Maybe you met with the provider and it feels like, I don't know, they meet all my criteria, but they don't quite click with me.
Connect, right.
And we may ask a couple of questions, like could you see them a couple times and make that decision? Because sometimes, the first time may not be the best for everybody involved. And so trying that out a little bit longer before we make a decision. Sometimes it may be that we go back to the drawing board and start again, because maybe you thought you could meet with a male provider, but then you sat down with a male provider and thought, no, I really would feel more comfortable with a woman, and meeting with him 3 times isn't going to change that. So we may go back to the drawing board and then start looking for a female provider instead for you. So it really is individualized and customized. But if at the end of the follow-up period you had a provider, it felt comfortable, and then for whatever reason it fell apart later, so let's say they went on maternity leave, or they moved out of the area, or for whatever reason it's not feeling like a good match, you can call us again and we will talk about that and try to guide you, but we can open up a new search if that seems like the best thing to do at that time, and we'll just begin the process again.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think that's so difficult for so many people. The first step is so daunting to recognizing that you need some type of help or intervention. And it's difficult for people to find the proper therapist for them, because a lot of people aren't going to ask their friends or family for recommendations. So this is a confidential place to get that recommendation and someone that they can communicate with and have that follow-up.
Yeah, and I think it's just nice for people not to have to make the 20 calls and repeat your story, which is hard to tell people.
And availability is always an issue too in terms of therapy. There's a lot of therapists are just booked, or they don't have time, or they're going to be 6 months out or something like that. And when people are in need of that kind of service, they want to get to the services as soon as possible.
Yes.
And how did you get that data bank of your 9,000 therapists?
So we have a team that does some recruiting of providers, and oftentimes it's word of mouth. Providers talk to each other as well, because we make their lives a bit easier too, in that we're very succinct with our messages, and they don't have to feel bad if they say yes or no to us. It's okay if they can't right now, and that's fine. So we have a team, and what happens when we come into a new community is we cull the resources that are already here. So we want to use Medway's go-to people. And so we're asking, who do you utilize currently, and could we invite them to be part of our database? So that's the first step. And then we sort of go out from there in terms of looking for other providers in the area that we can add to our database.
Excellent. Very good. So you have providers that be right here in Medway or right in the surrounding areas that you can refer people to.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. And what about insurance? I know that's an issue for so many people. If someone does not have insurance, what are your recommendations around that in terms of trying to get therapy?
Yes. So there's not a lot of providers, unfortunately, who can do free work. I wish that wasn't the case, but that's a challenge. So what we usually say is, if someone needs to utilize an insurance, their best bet is to try to connect with an insurance provider in terms of whether that be through work or the Health Connector. There's some options. We have on our website is a wealth of information, so I would tell people, even if they don't plan to call us, the website can be a great resource for all sorts of things related to mental health, and that's www.interface, interface.williamjames.edu.
Okay, great.
But there's a tab there that says Guides, and under that tab, Guides, there's a guide about insurance, and it talks about where you can go to get connected with insurance, and also all of those things related to insurance that we all struggle with, right? What does it mean to be in network, out of network? What is a copay? What is coinsurance?
Sure.
So all those questions that we may have, and what does that mean for us as we utilize our insurance, can be found in that guide.
Excellent. Yeah. Very good. Now, this is a service specific for Medway. So, if you're a Medway resident, do you have to prove your residency when you call to ask for the information?
We do, as part of our intake process, verify name, address, date of birth. So that's how we're checking to see if you're a resident.
Okay. And can you just speak again about the confidentiality? Because again, that's another concern for folks about, they're calling this helpline number and they're not quite sure what's happening with all of their information.
Yes. So like a medical office, we have a HIPAA compliant medical, type record that we have in terms of where we capture your information and how it's stored. And again, any contact with any providers is only going to be using that confidential code and telling non-identifiable information about you. So again, we talk about what insurance type, what locations, if the provider has multiple locations that you're interested in going to, what times you can go there, and a bit about what you're saying is the issue you want to address in treatment and what that looks like for you. But we're never saying your name, address, telephone number, anything identifiable about you to the provider. The only time they would learn that is when you reach out to the provider to actually schedule the appointment with them.
Okay, very good. And how is this program funded?
So every community is slightly different in terms of how they access funding. In terms of Medway, it's a collaboration between the fire department and the public schools.
Oh, okay, very good. And so is this just the funding going to be, is there an end point for this funding, or this is something that you anticipate is going to be continuing, that the service will be provided long term?
So every community signs up for a 2-year contract, and they pay for the contracts yearly. That way it makes it a little more manageable for the communities. In terms of actual funding, we leave it to the community liaisons to work out ongoing funding, and we just manage the contracts once they sign them. So that's an excellent question for the schools and the fire department.
Perfect. Okay, is there any other information that we haven't touched on about Interface that you'd like to get out to the community? You could share the phone number again. We'll also have it at the end of the program as well, and your website. That would be great too, for information for people to have.
I'm trying to think. I would just say please call us. We're here to help. And our phone number again is 888-244-6843. Again, we're available Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. And our website is www.interface.williamjames.edu. And as I mentioned, that is just a wealth of local and national resources, as well as very readable articles about mental health. There's a whole teen section that can be really helpful.
Oh, excellent.
So I just think there's a lot of wonderful information. Each community also has a page. And so if you click on the Communities tab, local resources in Medway are listed on the Medway page. And we have flyers, so when you asked about what happens when you call, if you went to the Medway page and clicked on the flyers in the upper right-hand corner, you could read all those steps that you and I talked about what will happen when they actually call us to do an intake. Because I know sometimes you hear the information, and for myself, it's hard to keep track of that, and I think, oh, I heard that, but I can't use it right now. I want to use it later. So the flyer is a lovely way to print that out so you can have that and understand all the steps that will occur when you call us.
Excellent. Very good. Well, thank you, Tanya, so much for joining us and all that wonderful information. This concludes this segment of Good to Know. Thank you for joining us, and join us next month when we're going to be talking about elder scams. Thank you.